AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after she wrecked my car and refuses to pay me back. So, some background. I, 28M, have a sister, Lily, 26F. We've always had a complicated relationship. We're not enemies, but we're not exactly close either. She's the kind of person who constantly needs attention and can be pretty selfish when things don't go her way. Growing up, she always expected my parents and me to bail her out when she got into trouble, but she never really seemed to learn from her mistakes. It used to drive me crazy, but I mostly stayed out of her drama once I moved out. I have a decent job, and I bought my first house a year ago. It's a 2-bedroom, not huge, but perfect for me. I was really proud of it. After I got the house, Lily started calling me more often. I don't mind chatting, but I could tell she had an agenda. One day, she dropped the bomb. She wanted to move in with me. Her reasoning? Her apartment lease was up, and she just couldn't afford rent right now. At first, I was caught off guard. I told her I wasn't sure if it would be a good idea, but she kept pushing. At the time, I wasn't super tight on space, so I agreed. She promised it would only be for a couple of months, just enough time for her to figure things out. She even said she would contribute to the rent. Looking back, I should have known better. But I trusted her. I was wrong. The first couple of weeks were fine, but then things started to spiral. Lily didn't follow through on her promise to pay rent. She always had an excuse. Her job wasn't paying her enough, or something unexpected came up. She also spent an insane amount of time lounging around, playing video games, or hanging out with her friends while I was working. I didn't mind her hanging out at the house, but it started getting frustrating when she didn't contribute in any meaningful way, whether financially or with household chores. Then came the incident that changed everything. I had a 2018 Toyota Corolla, which was my pride and joy. It was a good car, reliable, and I had saved up for years to buy it. One day, I had to leave early for work, so I asked Lily to move my car out of the driveway so I could get out. She was just waking up and agreed to do it. I didn't think twice about it. When I came home later that day, I saw my car in the driveway with the front end completely smashed in. The bumper was hanging off, the headlights were broken, and there was a huge dent in the hood. I was furious. I asked her what happened, and she hesitated before admitting she had backed into a tree while trying to park. Now, accidents happen. I get that. But what really pissed me off was her reaction. She didn't apologize or offer to pay for any of the repairs. In fact, she shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal and said, "Well, it's just a car. You can fix it, right?" I lost my temper and demanded she take responsibility and pay for the damage. She said she didn't have the money, and I told her I wasn't going to let her off the hook. After that, she started getting defensive. She told me I was being too dramatic and overreacting. She said that it wasn't even a big accident and that I was blowing it out of proportion. She also made a bunch of excuses about how she was in a rush and didn't know how to park properly. I couldn't believe it. I ended up getting an estimate for the repair, which came out to $2,500. I told her she needed to pay me back, and she refused. She said that since she didn't have the money, there was no way she could pay me back anytime soon. I gave her a couple of options. Either she could pay me back in installments, or she could use her savings, but she said it wasn't her fault and didn't feel like she should have to pay. At that point, I started losing my patience with her. I felt like she was taking advantage of me and didn't respect the fact that I was the one taking on the financial burden. She wasn't contributing to rent. She was using my space without respect, and now she had damaged my car and refused to make it right. I told her that this was not working, and I needed her to move out. She was shocked. She didn't take me seriously at first, thinking I was just angry and would change my mind. But when I kept insisting, she started crying and tried to guilt trip me. She said I was kicking her out when she had nowhere else to go and that I was being a terrible brother. She told me she didn't have the money to find a new place, and if I kicked her out, she'd have to go back to living with our parents, who, by the way, would never allow her to stay there because of her history of irresponsible behavior. I stuck to my guns, though. I told her that if she couldn't respect my space, my property, and my rules, she couldn't stay under my roof anymore. I also said I wasn't going to be her personal bank anymore, and she needed to grow up and handle her own responsibilities. She ended up calling me a bunch of names, and we haven't spoken much since. It's been about a month, and she hasn't made any real effort to pay me back for the damages. I've gotten some text messages from her telling me how unfair I'm being and how I'm ruining the family, but I'm sticking to my decision. Our parents are siding with her and telling me that I should have been more understanding, but I feel like I've done enough. Now, I'm questioning if I'm being too harsh. I'm really torn because I know she's not good with money and struggles to make ends meet. But at the same time, I don't think that means I should keep enabling her. I'm tired of being the one who has to clean up her messes, and I don't think I should have to carry that weight anymore. So, AITA for kicking my sister out of my house after she wrecked my car and refuses to pay me back. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's birthday party because she didn't invite my girlfriend? Okay, so this is a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it concise. I, 28M, have a best friend, Emma, 29F, who I've known since college. We've been inseparable ever since we met, and I've always considered her one of the most important people in my life. Emma and I have had a lot of fun over the years, from road trips to late-night talks, and even some crazy adventures. We've been through a lot together, and our bond is incredibly strong. Recently, I've been in a serious relationship with my girlfriend, Chloe, 26F. Chloe and I have been together for over a year now, and it's getting pretty serious. We've talked about moving in together, and I can see a future with her. Emma has met Chloe a couple of times, and while they're not best friends, they get along fine. Chloe has always been respectful and polite to Emma, and Emma has always been polite to Chloe. Nothing major to report there. So, Emma's birthday is coming up, and she's planning a big party to celebrate. She's always been big on birthdays and loves throwing big events with lots of people. She's been talking about it for weeks, getting excited about who she wants to invite and the whole vibe she's going for. Naturally, when she started talking about it, I asked if Chloe was invited. I thought that was a fair question since Chloe and I are a couple, and I'd like to go to the party with her. Emma immediately told me that she wasn't invited. I was a bit surprised, so I asked her why. Emma told me that she only wanted to invite close friends to the party, and while Chloe was nice and everything, they weren't that close. Emma mentioned that she didn't want the party to turn into too much of a couple-wide thing, where everyone brings their significant others. She said she wanted to keep it low-key and intimate, and that Chloe wasn't one of her core people anyway. I wasn't entirely happy with the explanation, but I didn't want to make a big deal about it at the time. But, of course, I couldn't help but feel a little hurt. It felt odd that my best friend, someone who I've known for so long, would exclude someone who is a significant part of my life, especially given that Chloe had been nothing but kind and respectful to her. I mean, this is a close friend of mine, and Emma knows how serious Chloe and I are. So, I did what any decent boyfriend would do. I told Chloe about the conversation. Chloe was understandably a bit taken aback. She said she didn't expect to be invited to everything, but it stung a little that Emma had said she wasn't a core person. Chloe didn't demand to be invited or make a scene about it, but I could tell it bothered her. She said, "I'm not going to make you choose between me and your best friend, but it's kind of weird that she would exclude me like that." After that conversation, I started thinking more about the situation. I mean, Emma is my best friend, but Chloe is my partner. It just felt off that Emma didn't want to include Chloe, and I began to feel like maybe I needed to stand up for my girlfriend. I talked to Emma again, this time more seriously. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable attending her party without Chloe. I explained that Chloe and I are a package deal, and it would mean a lot to me if she could invite her to the birthday party. I reminded Emma that Chloe and I are serious, and it was important to me that my partner be included in important events in my life. Emma got really defensive. She told me that she didn't want to have to worry about other people's feelings when it came to her own birthday party. She said it wasn't fair to her to be pressured into inviting people just because they were in a relationship with me. She even said that Chloe could come to the party if she was willing to accept the fact that she wasn't a part of the core group. Emma said that it wasn't personal. It's just that Chloe wasn't in her inner circle. At this point, I felt like I was hitting a wall. I understood that Emma wanted to keep the party small, but it didn't sit right with me that she wasn't willing to make room for someone who I care so deeply about. I thought about it for a few days, talked to Chloe more, and eventually made the decision that I wasn't going to attend Emma's birthday party if Chloe wasn't invited. So I texted Emma and told her that I wouldn't be attending the party if Chloe wasn't invited. I explained that it wasn't about forcing her to invite Chloe, but about standing by my partner. I let her know that I hoped she'd understand, but if she couldn't see where I was coming from, then maybe I shouldn't go. Emma got upset and started texting me about how it was her birthday, and she didn't understand why I couldn't just let it go. She said that I was overreacting and making her feel bad for no reason. Since then, things have been tense. Emma hasn't reached out to me directly, and Chloe feels like I've put her in an uncomfortable position. I know Chloe wants me to maintain my relationship with Emma, but she also doesn't want to feel like she's constantly being sidelined. Now, I'm feeling guilty. Emma and I have been friends for so long, and I don't want to damage our friendship, but I also feel like I'm doing the right thing by supporting my girlfriend. I've been getting mixed advice from friends, some of whom think I'm in the right for standing by Chloe, and others who think I should just suck it up and go to the party. So, AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's birthday party because she didn't invite my girlfriend? AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her kids to my vacation house, even though she's the one who helped me get it? I, 30F, have a best friend, Emma, 29F, who I've known since high school. We've always been super close, and we've been through a lot together. A few months ago, I bought a vacation home in a quiet area by the lake. It's a small place, not huge, but it's perfect for me to escape to when I need a break from the city and work. I've always wanted a place like this, and when the opportunity came up, I jumped on it. Now, Emma has 3 kids, 2 boys, 6 and 8, and a toddler girl. They're great kids, but they're also a handful. Emma and I don't have the same lifestyle. I'm single, and I enjoy quiet, peaceful time to recharge. Emma, on the other hand, has her hands full with her kids, and she's always juggling parenting and work. While I completely respect her and love her kids, I've never had to deal with the constant noise, mess, and demands that come with raising 3 young children. I know she's struggling to find a balance, but I also know that my personal space is important to me. A few months ago, after I bought the vacation house, Emma asked me if she could bring her kids with her for a weekend visit. She was super excited for me and thought it would be a great family getaway for her and the kids. She said they needed a break and that it would be great for them to experience the lake and the outdoor activities that come with it. I told her I was hesitant because the house was small and not really kid-friendly. There was no fenced yard, and I had a lot of delicate furniture and decorations that I didn't want to risk getting ruined. But Emma kept pushing, saying it would be fine and that she would handle everything. At first, I thought maybe I was being selfish by not offering to let her bring the kids. After all, she had been there for me during some difficult times, and I knew how hard her life was. I also knew it meant a lot to her, and I didn't want to let her down. So, I reluctantly agreed, but I set a few boundaries. I told her that I wanted to keep the weekend low-key and relaxing, and that I didn't want her kids running around the house, touching things, or making a mess everywhere. I also made it clear that if they broke anything, she would be responsible for replacing it. Emma said she understood and would make sure everything went smoothly. The weekend arrived, and things immediately went off the rails. Emma arrived with the kids, and from the moment they stepped into the house, it was chaos. The kids were running through the house, yelling, and jumping on the furniture. Emma didn't seem to notice or care, and when I politely asked her to have them calm down, she would just tell them to settle down for a minute, but never actually enforced any kind of real behavior. She was too busy trying to keep up with them, and I could tell that she was already overwhelmed. By the end of the first day, I could feel myself getting anxious and stressed. I was trying to relax, but the noise was constant. The kids kept spilling snacks on the couch, leaving their toys everywhere, and my favorite vase got knocked over and shattered. I was frustrated, but I didn't want to cause a scene or make Emma feel bad, so I just bit my tongue. But things didn't get any better. The second day, the kids were even more energetic. They wanted to go down to the lake, but I didn't feel comfortable with them near the water unsupervised, especially because the area around the lake was a little steep and dangerous. Emma didn't want to hear it. She was tired and just wanted them to be entertained for a while so she could rest. When I insisted on keeping them away from the lake, she got defensive and said, come on, they're not going to drown. Stop being so uptight. This is supposed to be fun. I didn't want to be the fun police, but I was genuinely concerned about their safety. After some back and forth, she reluctantly agreed to stay by the house, but the kids were bored and continued to run wild inside. The noise was unbearable, and at one point, one of the kids spilled an entire cup of juice on the living room rug I had just bought. I felt my patience wearing thin. I was no longer able to relax, and it was starting to feel more like a job than a getaway. That night, after I had cleaned up yet another mess, I finally snapped. I told Emma that this wasn't working for me and that I needed some space. She was taken aback and tried to argue that I was overreacting, but I stood firm. I told her that I didn't sign up for having my entire house turned upside down for a weekend and that I had set clear boundaries. She apologized, but it felt insincere. The kids were already upset from being told they couldn't go to the lake, and the whole thing just felt like it was falling apart. The next morning, I asked Emma if she could leave early. She seemed hurt and asked why I was kicking them out. I explained that I didn't feel comfortable with the way things were going and that I needed my space to relax. She got really upset and said I was being unfair, especially since she helped me find the house in the first place. She reminded me that I never would have been able to afford it without her input and that I was being ungrateful. I told her that I appreciated her help, but that didn't mean I had to let her bring her kids into a space that I had specifically bought to get away from everything. She left, but not without making me feel guilty for kicking her out. Since then, Emma has barely spoken to me. She sent me a text saying that I had no idea how hard it was to be a mom and that I shouldn't have treated her like she was a burden. I feel bad that I hurt her feelings, but at the same time, I'm not sure I did anything wrong. I'm starting to feel like she sees my vacation house as a place for her family to use, and that's not what it's meant to be. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her kids to my vacation house, even though she helped me find it. AITA for refusing to help my brother with his business after he mocked me for my job. I, 27M, work as a software developer. It's a stable job, pays well, and I'm doing pretty well for myself. I'm not exactly passionate about it, but I'm good at it, and it provides me with the kind of lifestyle I'm comfortable with. I also have a side hustle where I do freelance work on various tech projects, which is how I make extra money and gain some satisfaction from my work. It's not glamorous, but it's what I do, and I like the freedom it gives me. My brother, Matt, 29M, has a completely different job. He owns a small landscaping business, which he started a few years ago. He's always been very into physical work, and while I've always respected his hustle, I'll admit I don't understand the appeal. Matt seems to think his business is more real than mine. He has a lot of pride in his work and frequently makes comments about how his job involves real work and not sitting in front of a computer all day. He often refers to my job as easy or boring because I sit at a desk and deal with virtual things instead of working with my hands. I've never said anything to him about his business or what he does for a living. I respect that he enjoys it, and I don't see the point in getting into a debate about whose job is harder or more valuable. However, the constant comments have started to wear on me. I'll be honest, I've been frustrated by the way he's belittled my job over the years. But I always try to brush it off, figuring that we could each be happy in our own lives, even if we didn't completely understand each other's choices. The situation came to a head a couple of weeks ago. Matt called me up, excited about a new opportunity for his business. He had secured a contract with a large local property management company to handle landscaping for several apartment complexes. It was a big deal for him, and he wanted me to help him out. Specifically, he wanted me to create a website for his business to help him organize his clients, bookings, and showcase his work. He told me it would bring in more customers and make him look more professional. He offered to pay me for the job, which sounded fair to me. I agreed to help him out because, despite his attitude toward my job, I figured that this could be an opportunity to help him and maybe prove to him that my work had value. I told him I'd be happy to help, but I also asked if he could take it more seriously. I mentioned that I didn't appreciate his comments about my job being easy and that I wanted him to respect my work as much as I respected his. He brushed it off, saying something like, "I didn't mean anything by it. I don't really get what you do, but it's all good." The day after that conversation, I sat down and started working on the website. I didn't expect it to be a massive project, but I wanted to do a good job. I created a simple, clean design, set up everything he asked for, and even threw in some extra features that I thought would make the site more functional. I worked on it for a few days and sent it over to him for feedback. When Matt looked at it, his reaction was not what I expected. He barely glanced at it and immediately started criticizing the design, saying it was too fancy and not really the vibe he was going for. He told me it looked too much like a corporate website and asked if I could make it more down-to-earth, like a real landscaping business. He said that he wanted something more simple and nothing too complicated. I was a little taken aback, but I figured maybe I had missed the mark. So I made some revisions, scaling it back and simplifying it further, and sent it back to him. His next response, however, was what really set me off. He texted me, "Honestly, I don't even know why I'm bothering you with this. It's not like you're busy doing anything important anyway. You sit in front of a computer all day. How hard can it be to make a website?" I was stunned. The level of disrespect in that message was overwhelming. He was once again mocking my job and acting like it was somehow easier than what he was doing. I immediately replied and told him that I didn't appreciate his attitude toward my work and that if he didn't value my skills, then I wasn't going to help him anymore. I told him I was done with the website and that he should find someone else to do it. Matt called me right away, furious. He accused me of being overdramatic and taking things too personally. He said I was acting like I was the only one who worked hard and that I should just get over myself. He told me he'd been trying to help me out by giving me a paid project and that I was being ungrateful. I told him that I wasn't ungrateful, but I was tired of him treating my job like it was insignificant. I explained that I didn't need him to help me out with anything, especially if he wasn't going to respect my work. The conversation escalated from there, with Matt getting angrier and accusing me of being pretentious and thinking I'm too good for him. In the end, we both hung up on each other, and I haven't spoken to him since. Now, our parents are involved, and they're both upset with me. They think I overreacted and that I should just let it go. They argue that Matt didn't mean to insult me and that I should be more supportive of his business. My friends, on the other hand, mostly agree with me and think Matt was out of line. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I understand that Matt's pride in his business comes from a different place, and maybe he wasn't trying to hurt me. On the other hand, I feel like I've been disrespected multiple times, and I don't know if I can just let it slide. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother with his business after he mocked me for my job. AITA for telling my friend she can't bring her emotional support dog to my house after she ignored my boundaries. So here's the situation. I, 27F, have a close friend, Sarah, 28F, who I've known for about 5 years. We're the type of friends who check in regularly, hang out often, and support each other through a lot. Sarah has always been open about her struggles with anxiety and depression, and I've always done my best to be there for her. She's been through some tough stuff, and I really try to be understanding and empathetic. A couple of years ago, Sarah got an emotional support dog, Rocky, a medium-sized mixed breed. She explained to me that having Rocky helped her manage her anxiety, and while I didn't completely understand at first, I respected her decision. Rocky is, by all accounts, a well-behaved dog. He's calm, doesn't bark much, and is generally quiet. However, she has made it clear that he's her emotional crutch, and she feels that she can't be without him for extended periods of time. She's brought him with her when we've gone out to cafes or other places, and I've never had an issue with it. I'm not the biggest dog lover, but I understand how important pets can be to people who are struggling with mental health, so I've always tried to be supportive of her relationship with Rocky. A few months ago, I moved into a new apartment, and while I've had Sarah over to visit a couple of times, we hadn't had a long hangout at my place until recently. Sarah reached out to me a few weeks ago and asked if she could come over for a weekend to stay with me and hang out, and she immediately asked if she could bring Rocky along. She said that she's been struggling with some anxiety lately, and that it would make her feel a lot more comfortable if she could bring him. I was hesitant, but agreed to let him come, mainly because I didn't want to let her down. I thought it would be no big deal, especially since he's well-behaved, and she's brought him to places before where dogs weren't typically allowed. When she arrived, things seemed fine at first. Rocky was calm, didn't make much noise, and generally kept to himself. But pretty quickly, things started to get a little uncomfortable. I've always had a few house rules that I expect guests to follow. No pets on the furniture, no chewing on things they shouldn't, and definitely no dogs in my bedroom. My bedroom is my sanctuary, and I really value my personal space. I told Sarah this when she arrived, just to make sure she was on the same page. She seemed fine with it at the time, but Rocky quickly ignored the no furniture rule and jumped up on the couch. I kindly asked her to move him off, which she did, but she also seemed annoyed by it. I brushed it off, assuming it was just a little moment of inconvenience. As the weekend went on, I started to notice more and more little things that were starting to irritate me. For one, Rocky kept trying to get into my bedroom, despite me repeatedly telling Sarah that he wasn't allowed in there. I wasn't asking for much, just a little respect for my boundaries. Sarah kept saying things like, "Oh, he's just a dog, he doesn't understand," or "he's really attached to me." You know how it is. I could tell she wasn't really taking my request seriously, and Rocky kept sneaking into my bedroom when I wasn't looking, which left me feeling uncomfortable in my own space. Another issue was with the dog's bathroom habits. I have hardwood floors, and while I don't mind cleaning up after a dog occasionally, I didn't expect Sarah to let him just roam around and potty wherever he wanted. On the second day of her visit, I found out that Rocky had peed on my rug in the living room. I was upset, but I didn't want to make a huge deal out of it, so I quietly cleaned it up and told Sarah what had happened. She apologized, but when I told her I needed to keep a closer eye on him, she got defensive, saying that it's hard for her to monitor him when she's trying to relax. I was taken aback by her response, but I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. The final straw for me came when we were about to go out for dinner one night. I was ready to leave, but Sarah was taking forever to get Rocky settled. She insisted on feeding him, letting him get comfortable, and checking his leash and collar multiple times before we could even head out. I told her I didn't mind waiting a little bit, but when it turned into an hour of back and forth, I started to get really frustrated. We were supposed to be out to dinner, and I wasn't expecting to spend so much time on dog preparation. I told her that she needed to get a move on because I'd already made reservations, and she snapped at me, saying that I didn't understand how stressful it was for her to be separated from Rocky, even for a short time. I tried to be patient and said I understood her stress, but that I needed to set some boundaries as well, especially when it was affecting our plans. By this point, I was feeling pretty drained. I'm not opposed to having a pet in the house, but I felt like my boundaries were being ignored, and I was starting to feel like Sarah was prioritizing her emotional needs over my comfort. I've always been there for her when she needs me, but this felt like too much. I was really hoping we could have a relaxed weekend together, but instead, I felt like I was living in a space where my needs weren't being respected. After that, I told Sarah that I didn't think I could continue letting Rocky stay at my apartment. I explained that while I respected her bond with him and understood how important he was to her, I needed my personal space and couldn't have him roaming freely around the house. I also mentioned that I didn't appreciate how she hadn't fully respected the house rules I set. I tried to be as understanding as possible, but I told her that I felt overwhelmed and that I needed some time without the dog in my space. Sarah was really hurt by this, and she started crying, telling me that I was being unsupportive and that it felt like I was rejecting her. She said that this was one of the worst things I could do to her, and that she wouldn't be able to visit me again if I didn't accept Rocky. She went on about how she couldn't relax without him, and that my refusal made her feel like I didn't care about her mental health. I felt awful. I didn't want to hurt her, but at the same time, I felt like I had a right to set boundaries in my own home. After some back and forth, she left early, and things have been pretty tense between us since. We haven't really spoken much, and I've been wondering if I was too harsh. I don't want to lose my friend, but I also don't want to feel like I'm being walked over. So, AITA for telling my friend she can't bring her emotional support dog to my house after she ignored my boundaries. AITA for refusing to give my brother a loan for his business because he constantly belittles my job. So here's the situation. I, 30M, have a brother, Alex, 33M, and we've always had a bit of a strained relationship. We're not enemies or anything, but growing up, we just didn't click. I was always the bookish kid, more into academics and quiet hobbies, while Alex was the doer, always building things, fixing cars, and just generally getting his hands dirty. He was more popular in high school, always surrounded by friends, while I was more of a quiet, reserved introvert. Over the years, we've both gone our separate ways, and our relationship has always been polite but distant. I have a steady job as a data analyst at a well-known tech company. It's not a job that excites me every day, but it's well-paying, and it gives me the financial stability I need to live comfortably. I don't love the work, but I enjoy the benefits: good pay, work-life balance, job security. I also have a small side gig in freelance writing and content creation, which allows me to pursue some of my creative interests. Alex, on the other hand, runs his own auto repair shop. He's always been passionate about cars and mechanics, and he started his business a few years ago. Initially, his shop was just a small local repair service, but over the last couple of years, he's expanded it significantly. He's now renting a bigger space, and he started offering more specialized services, like custom modifications and performance upgrades for cars. I respect the fact that he's built something from the ground up, and I know it's been a tough road for him. However, there's been a constant tension between us that I can't seem to shake. Over the past year, Alex has made more and more comments about my job. Whenever we get together for family events or just casual hangouts, he's always talking down on the desk jobs or office workers. He calls it easy money and says that people like me are living in a bubble because we don't have to work with our hands. He'll talk about how he has to bust his back every day dealing with real problems while I sit in front of a screen all day. It's not like he's just made a few offhand comments. He does this constantly. It's like he takes every opportunity to belittle my work. I've tried to explain to him that it's not as simple as he thinks. I don't just sit around doing nothing. My work involves a lot of complex problem solving, analytics, and long hours in front of a computer. But every time I try to defend my job, Alex brushes it off and says something like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. You sit at a desk and call it work while I'm out here fixing cars and making something real." I can't help but feel like he's looking down on me for what I do. Now, here's where the issue really starts. A few weeks ago, Alex came to me asking for a loan. He explained that his business was at a crossroads. He wanted to expand further, get more equipment, and hire more people, but he needed capital to do it. He told me he had exhausted his options with banks and investors, and he knew I was doing well financially. He promised that he'd pay me back in a year with interest, and he seemed genuinely desperate. I didn't want to immediately say no, so I agreed to meet him for lunch to discuss the details. During the lunch, he went on and on about how he needed the money to grow his business and how real work like his business requires real investment. He even joked, "I know you probably think I'm just fixing cars all day, but this is the kind of business that takes guts and real work, not just sitting in an office." At this point, I was starting to get annoyed. Here he was asking me for a loan, while continuing to belittle my career and act like what I do isn't real work. I asked him if he thought I was being disrespectful to his job, and he just shrugged it off. He told me that he wasn't trying to disrespect me, but it's just the way things are. People like me don't understand the struggles of people like him. I spent a couple of days thinking it over. On the one hand, I do care about Alex, and I want to see him succeed. He's family, and I know how hard he's worked to get where he is. But on the other hand, I just couldn't get past the way he constantly belittles me and my job. It's one thing to ask for help, but it's another to continue making me feel inferior for doing something that's respectable in its own right. So, I decided to have an honest conversation with him. I told him that I wasn't comfortable lending him the money, not because I didn't want to help him, but because I didn't feel like he respected me or my career. I explained that he constantly belittles my job and makes me feel like it's less valuable than his, and that made it hard for me to trust him. I told him that if he wanted to ask for help, he needed to start treating my job with the same respect that I try to treat his. Alex got defensive immediately. He said that I was overreacting and that it was just a joke. He told me I was too sensitive and that I shouldn't take it so personally. He accused me of not being supportive and said that I was just jealous of his success. He also said, "If you can't even help out your own brother, then what kind of family are we?" At this point, I was frustrated. I told him that he could keep making jokes about my job, but it wasn't going to change the fact that I didn't feel respected by him. I said that I wasn't asking him to praise my job or agree with it, but I wanted basic respect. I reminded him that I've always supported him in other ways, whether it was helping with repairs when I could or offering advice, but he wasn't willing to extend that same respect to me. Since then, Alex hasn't spoken to me much. He's been sending passive-aggressive texts about how I'm too good to help him and how I don't understand what it's like to really work for a living. I'm torn about whether I did the right thing. On one hand, I feel like I stood up for myself and drew a boundary, but on the other hand, I feel like maybe I could have just sucked it up and helped him out. I don't know if I'm being too hard on him, or if he really does need to learn some basic respect for others' work. So, AITA for refusing to give my brother a loan for his business because he constantly belittles my job. AITA for not letting my brother's girlfriend move in after she lied about her living situation. I, 30F, have a brother, Tom, 28M, who I've always been pretty close with. We've had our ups and downs over the years, but overall, we've always had a good relationship. He recently started dating someone, Emily, 27F, and things have been moving pretty quickly between them. They've been dating for about 8 months now, and while I've always been polite and tried to be friendly with Emily, I'm starting to feel like things are getting a little uncomfortable, especially with her wanting to move in with us. A little background. I live in a house that I bought a couple of years ago. It's not huge, but it's cozy and definitely enough space for me. I'm not rich by any means, but I've always been independent and I love my home. Over the past few months, Emily has come up a lot in conversation with Tom. They've been talking about how serious they are, and one day, Tom brought up the idea of her possibly moving in with him. I thought this was a bit soon, especially since they'd only been dating for a few months, but I didn't really say anything. I figured it was their relationship, and if they wanted to take that step, it was up to them. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. Tom came to me and asked if Emily could move in with me for a little while. I was a little taken aback, to say the least. I didn't even know Emily had been looking for a place, but apparently, her lease was up at her apartment, and she didn't have anywhere else to go. Tom explained that she was having trouble finding a place because of her credit score, and he asked if I could help her out by letting her stay with me temporarily. He said it would only be for a couple of months while she got her situation figured out. He assured me that Emily wasn't trying to move in permanently, but just needed a place to stay while she sorted things out. I didn't immediately say no, but I made it clear that I needed some time to think about it. I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with the idea, but I also didn't want to be unreasonable. It seemed like Tom really wanted to help her, and I understood that. I also knew that if I said no, it could cause tension between me and Tom, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to deal with that. So, I told him I'd think it over and get back to him. After giving it some thought, I decided to talk to Emily directly. I wanted to get a better sense of what was going on and why she needed to move in with me. When I asked her about her situation, she said that her lease was up and she was having trouble finding a new place. She mentioned that her landlord was selling the apartment and that she hadn't been able to secure a new place because of her credit score. At first, I felt bad for her, and I could see why Tom wanted to help her. But as we talked more, I started to notice some inconsistencies in her story. For one, she kept avoiding giving me any specifics about her apartment situation. When I pressed her about when her lease ended, she gave me vague answers, and when I asked why she hadn't started looking for a new place earlier, she seemed uncomfortable and deflected. I tried to brush it off as just nerves, but something fell off. I did a little digging and found out through mutual friends that Emily had actually been living with a roommate up until recently. The roommate had told some people that Emily had moved out because she was having trouble paying rent and that she'd left without warning. The more I learned, the more I realized that Emily's story didn't add up. It wasn't just a credit issue or bad timing with her lease. It seemed like she had run into financial problems and wasn't being completely honest about it. I decided to confront her about what I'd heard. I told Emily that I'd heard some things from mutual friends, and I wanted to give her a chance to explain. At first, she denied it all, insisting that she had left her old place because of a personal disagreement with a roommate, and that she was having trouble finding a new apartment due to her credit score. But as I continued to ask questions, she started to get defensive. She claimed that I was overreacting and that I was being unfair to her. She even said that she felt like I didn't trust her, which made me feel guilty. Still, something didn't sit right with me. I wasn't asking for her life story, but I felt like I was being given half-truths, and that didn't sit well with me. I needed to know more, and I wasn't going to let her move in without understanding the full picture. After our conversation, I talked to Tom and told him that I didn't feel comfortable letting Emily move in with me. I explained my concerns and how her story didn't add up. Tom got really upset with me. He told me I was being judgmental and that I should just help Emily out, especially since she was going through a tough time. He said that I was overthinking things and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. We ended up having a huge argument. Tom accused me of not supporting him and not being there for his girlfriend when she needed help. He said I was making it difficult for him to help someone he cared about and that I was being selfish by not offering Emily a place to stay. He even went so far as to say that if I really cared about him, I'd help out and let Emily stay with me for a little while. I told him that I cared about him, but I also cared about my own boundaries and my home. I wasn't comfortable with the idea of letting someone into my space who hadn't been honest with me, and I didn't think I should have to do that just to keep the peace. The fallout from that conversation has been pretty rough. Tom is still upset with me, and he's been distant. He's brought up the situation a few times, and it always ends in a fight. Emily also reached out to me once, telling me that she was hurt by my refusal to help her. She said that it was unfair for me to judge her, and that she would have been grateful for any help I could offer. She even mentioned that Tom was really upset with me, which made me feel like I was being put in a difficult spot. Since then, I've been wondering if I made the right decision. I understand that Tom wants to help his girlfriend, but I feel like I have every right to set boundaries when it comes to my own home. I'm not obligated to let someone move in if I don't feel comfortable with it, and I don't think I should have to compromise my own peace of mind just to avoid conflict. But I also don't want to lose my relationship with Tom over this. So, AITA for not letting my brother's girlfriend move in after she lied about her living situation. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for not letting my friend's kid come to my house after I specifically said, no kids allowed. I, 32F, have a good friend, Rachel, 33F, who I've known for about 7 years. We met through work and instantly clicked. Rachel is the kind of person who's fun, thoughtful, and always up for a good time, but we have one big difference when it comes to lifestyle. I have always been very clear that I love my personal space. I don't mind hanging out with people or going out, but I've never been a fan of having kids around. I don't have any children of my own, and I don't really plan on having them. I enjoy my quiet home and the freedom to do what I want without worrying about toys everywhere, noise, or schedules revolving around nap times and school runs. It's just not the environment I want to live in, and I've always been upfront about that with my friends. Rachel knows this. We've had conversations about kids before, and I've made it clear that I'm not comfortable with children at my place. I'm fine meeting up for coffee, going out to dinner, or meeting at parks or other kid-friendly places, but I just don't want kids in my house. She was totally understanding and respected that. At least I thought she did. Recently, I decided to have a small gathering at my house with a few close friends to celebrate a milestone in my life. I didn't want anything too extravagant, just a relaxed evening of good food and drinks, some music, and catching up. I specifically told everyone when I sent out the invite that I wanted it to be a kid-free event. I'm very clear about this whenever I host anything at my place. It's a hard rule, and I made it clear that I just didn't want kids around for this particular evening. It wasn't that I don't like kids, it's just that I really needed this time to unwind and not have to entertain or deal with the extra noise or chaos that kids can sometimes bring. Rachel responded positively, saying she was excited for the gathering and that she'd love to come. I was happy to hear that. She mentioned that she'd be coming alone, which was great because I knew she respected my rules. But then, a couple of days before the event, she texted me saying, "Hey, so, I know you said no kids, but I was hoping you'd make an exception for my son, Ben 8. I'm really in a bind. My babysitter canceled last minute, and I don't have anyone to watch him. I promise he's super well behaved, and it'll only be for a few hours. He can just hang out in the corner and play with his tablet." I was immediately annoyed. I had specifically told her no kids. The "I promise he's well behaved" comment also didn't sit right with me. As much as I love Rachel, this was my boundary. I'd given her a clear answer before, and I expected her to respect that. It wasn't that I didn't trust her or didn't like her son. It's just that I needed this time for myself and my friends without worrying about entertaining children. I responded politely but firmly, saying, "Rachel, I know this is last minute, but I really can't make an exception. I've always been clear about not having kids over, and I need to stick to that. I really hope you understand. I'd love to hang out with you another time when it's just us." She replied quickly, saying, "I get it, but please, I really don't have anyone else to turn to. He's super independent, and it's just one night. I promise it won't be any trouble. I'll make sure he stays out of the way, I swear." I didn't want to be rude, but at this point, I was feeling more and more uncomfortable. I just didn't want to open the door to bending my boundaries. So I said, "Rachel, I understand that things come up, but this is my personal space. I've been clear about no kids and need to stick to that. I'm really sorry, but I can't make an exception." She didn't respond right away. I figured she'd understand, and I thought that was the end of it. However, the day before the party, I received a text from Rachel that left me a little stunned. She said, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I've been thinking about it, and I don't feel like I can come without Ben. I don't have anyone to watch him. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I know I said I'd come, but I don't want to be an inconvenience. Maybe it's best if I skip the party this time." At first, I didn't really know how to respond. I felt bad for her, but I also felt like I was being put in a very awkward position. I didn't want to lose a friend over something as trivial as a party, but I also didn't want to be pushed into compromising my boundaries. I felt stuck. I texted back, "Rachel, I really hope you don't feel like you're an inconvenience. I completely understand that you're in a tough spot, but I also need to honor the space I've created here. This is important to me, and I need to be clear about the environment I want. I would love to see you soon, though. Maybe we can hang out next week." She responded almost immediately, saying, "I get it. I guess I'll just stay home then. I hope we can still be friends after this. I was really looking forward to celebrating with you, but I understand your rules." I felt a bit of relief, but also sadness. I didn't want things to be awkward, but I also didn't want to feel like my rules were constantly being tested. It's been a week since then, and Rachel has barely spoken to me. I reached out a couple of times just to check in, but she's been distant. We've always had a very open, honest relationship, and I feel like she's now mad at me for not accommodating her situation. I'm now questioning whether I was too rigid or unfair in sticking to my rules. I get that she was in a tough spot, but I feel like I had a right to maintain my boundaries, especially since I'd communicated them clearly in advance. At the same time, I feel guilty that I might have hurt my friendship by not making an exception, especially when it was important to her. So, AITA for not letting my friend's kid come to my house after I specifically said, "No kids allowed." AITA for refusing to let my friend stay at my place after she treated me poorly during my tough time. I, 29F, am having a hard time figuring out if I'm in the wrong here, so I'd appreciate some unbiased advice. I've been friends with Rachel, 30F, for about 8 years. We met in college, and at first, we hit it off instantly. Over the years, we've been through a lot together. We've traveled, had some major life events, and celebrated each other's successes. But the last year or so has really made me reconsider the nature of our friendship, and now I'm unsure if I'm justified in feeling hurt and upset by her actions. To give some context, about 6 months ago, I went through a rough breakup. It was a long-term relationship, for years, and while I was the one who ended it, it still hit me hard emotionally. During the first few weeks, I barely left my apartment. I spent a lot of time crying, processing my feelings, and try to regain some sense of normalcy. I reached out to Rachel during that time for support, as she had been a rock for me in the past during tough times. Initially, Rachel was supportive. She checked in on me, sent a few texts, and even invited me out a couple of times to get my mind off things. But things started to change after the first month. Instead of continuing to be supportive, Rachel began to act as if my breakup was a minor inconvenience in her life. She would make comments like, "Are you still sad about that guy? It's been forever, move on." Or, "I really don't understand why you're still upset. You've got a great job, a nice place, and you'll meet someone new soon." She kept telling me that I needed to get over it because life is too short to be sad. I don't know if I can fully explain the hurt that I felt when she said those things. I mean, yes, I knew that time would help me heal, but it didn't feel good to have someone invalidate my emotions like that. I confided in her that I was still processing, and I felt like I wasn't being given the space to do that. But she continued to brush me off and make me feel like I was dragging out a situation that wasn't worth grieving. At some point, I began to distance myself from Rachel. I didn't want to hang out with her or talk to her because she just didn't seem to understand what I was going through. Every time we spoke, it felt like she was pushing me to move on in a way that didn't feel natural to me. After about 2 months of this, I started to focus on my own healing without relying on her. I leaned on other friends who were more understanding, and I began to feel better. Fast forward to a couple of months ago, when Rachel contacted me out of the blue. She told me she was having some issues with her apartment. She had a falling out with her roommate and needed a place to stay for a few weeks. At first, I was hesitant, mainly because our friendship had become strained. But she insisted, saying she needed help, and I figured maybe this was a chance to rebuild our friendship. She promised that she would be low maintenance and wouldn't cause any trouble. I thought about it for a couple of days, and in the end, I agreed to let her stay at my place. When she moved in, things were fine at first. She was polite, helped with groceries, and kept to herself mostly. But as the days went on, she started slipping back into old habits. She would leave her things around the apartment, leave dishes in the sink, and just generally be inconsiderate. What really started bothering me, though, was how she treated me when I would ask for her to respect my space. For example, I'd tell her that I needed to work on some freelance projects in my office, and she'd ignore my request and hang out in there anyway. Or I'd ask her not to eat my food that I had specifically set aside for myself, and she'd eat it without asking. I let these little things slide at first because I didn't want to cause tension, but after a while, it started to build up. But the real breaking point came when Rachel started making passive-aggressive comments about my life. We were sitting in a living room one night, talking about our respective careers, and she mentioned how nice it must be to have a stable desk job. She went on about how she wished she could be more settled like me. The tone of her voice wasn't exactly supportive or complimentary. It was more like she was mocking the fact that I had a secure job while she was struggling with her own career path and her living situation. She also mentioned that she didn't understand why I needed so much alone time and how she thought I was just hiding from life. It really felt like she was trying to put me down for having the life that I had worked hard to build. A few days after that conversation, I brought up the fact that I felt like I was being treated unfairly. I told her that I was grateful she was staying with me, but the disrespectful comments, the inconsiderate behavior, and the lack of personal space were starting to make me feel uncomfortable. She was quiet for a moment before telling me I was overreacting and that I should just be more laid back about the situation. She said that she had a lot on her plate and didn't mean anything by the comments. She implied that I was being uptight and that I should learn to let things go. At that point, I had had enough. I wasn't going to let her keep disrespecting me in my own home. I told her that I needed her to find another place to stay because the situation wasn't working for me. I also explained that I didn't feel like she was treating me with the same respect I had shown her when she was going through tough times. Rachel was furious. She immediately started crying and accusing me of being a terrible friend, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She claimed that I was too busy with my own life to care about what she was going through. She made me feel guilty for wanting her to leave, and she said I was kicking her out because I was too good for her. I tried to explain that it wasn't about abandoning her. It was about respecting my boundaries, and I couldn't continue to let her stay if I wasn't being treated fairly. In the end, she left the next day, but things have been really awkward between us since. She hasn't reached out to apologize, and I haven't made an effort to contact her either. I feel guilty for asking her to leave, but at the same time, I'm relieved that the tension is gone. I've been questioning whether I did the right thing, especially since she was going through a tough time, but I also know that my emotional well-being matters too. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend stay at my place after she treated me poorly during my tough time. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my friend after she crashed it the last time. I, 29F, have a friend, Becca, 30F, who I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together, and I've always considered her one of my closest friends. She's been through her fair share of struggles, including some tough financial situations, and I've tried to be there for her as much as I can. I know she can be a bit reckless at times, but I've always tried to cut her some slack because I know she's had a lot on her plate. A couple of months ago, Becca reached out to me asking if she could borrow my car for the weekend. She explained that her car had broken down and she had an important family event to attend that weekend, but she couldn't afford a rental car. She promised she would take great care of it and said it would just be for a couple of days. At first, I was hesitant, but I agreed, mostly because I wanted to be supportive. I don't mind helping friends in need, especially when it's something that seems like a small ask. The weekend came, and I gave her my car. I made sure to remind her of a few things, like how my car has been really reliable, but it has some quirks, and I don't want anyone to drive it recklessly. I also told her that I just had it serviced, and that I was really hoping she would take care of it, because it's important to me. She assured me she would be careful and that everything would be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. The day she was supposed to return the car, I got a text from her saying that she had been in a minor accident. According to her, she was driving on a wet road and lost control of the car, hitting a guardrail. I was absolutely stunned. Becca has always been a somewhat reckless driver. Nothing too major, but she's been known to get into a fender bender here and there. But this was beyond just a small scrape. She said she had already contacted her insurance, and the car was still drivable, so it didn't seem like too much damage at first. I was just glad that she was okay, but I was upset that she hadn't called me sooner and that it was my car involved in the accident. When she brought the car back, I took a closer look and my stomach dropped. The front fender was severely dented. The bumper had a noticeable crack, and there were scratches all over the side. It wasn't a minor accident at all. This was bad. My heart sank as I realized the cost of repairs would be significant, especially since my car wasn't new. It was older, but I took good care of it. I immediately asked her what had happened, and she explained again about the wet road and how she slipped and hit the guardrail. She apologized, but it didn't feel like enough. I asked her if she had been drinking or distracted in any way, and she got defensive, saying she wasn't drunk and had only been momentarily distracted by the music. She kept repeating that it was an accident, which of course it was, but that didn't change the fact that it was my car and that she had essentially wrecked it. I asked her what her insurance said, and she told me that they were covering the damages, but that I'd likely have to pay a deductible, which I knew would be expensive. I was already frustrated, but it got worse when I started looking into how much it would cost to repair the car. After getting a few estimates, I realized that the repairs were going to be well over $2,000, not counting the deductible. I didn't have that kind of money just lying around, and I didn't want to have to pay that out of pocket. I had a lot of other financial obligations at the time, and this just wasn't something I was prepared for. I didn't want to make Becca feel bad, but I was really upset. I told her that I was going to have to pay for the repairs, and she offered to help out by contributing some money, but I knew she wasn't in a position to cover much. She had just started a new job and wasn't making much yet, so I declined her offer. Still, it didn't sit right with me. She was acting like it was no big deal, and I felt like she didn't fully grasp the inconvenience and the financial strain this was putting on me. I had trusted her with something important, and now I was left with a big mess to clean up. Now, fast forward a few months. Becca's car situation is still the same. She still doesn't have a reliable car, and she's still struggling with her finances. Recently, she reached out to me again, asking if she could borrow my car for another weekend. She said that her family was planning a get-together and that she really needed a car to get there. She promised she wouldn't drive recklessly this time and that she would be extra careful. She even said she would take care of the gas and bring it back clean. I immediately felt uncomfortable. I remember the last time she borrowed my car and how badly it had turned out. She hadn't really made an effort to repair the relationship between us after the accident. I still felt like she hadn't truly taken responsibility for what happened, and the thought of trusting her with my car again made me anxious. I also still hadn't fully recovered from the financial strain of the repairs, and I couldn't bear the idea of going through that again. I told her that I wasn't comfortable lending her my car this time. I explained that I didn't want to risk another accident, and that I'd been hurt by how the last situation was handled. I told her I needed to set some boundaries for my own peace of mind, and that I hoped she could understand. Becca was pretty upset by this. She said she was disappointed in me and that she thought I'd be more supportive, especially since she was in a tough spot. She said she'd always been there for me when I needed help, and she expected the same in return. I get that she's in a tough situation, but I don't think I'm the one who should be responsible for helping her out when it comes to something like this. I've helped her out in many ways before, but I feel like this is a situation where I need to protect myself and my assets. I don't want to be taken advantage of, and I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm financially burdened because of someone else's mistakes. Since I refused, Becca has been distant with me. She stopped texting me as much, and she hasn't really reached out to hang out like we used to. I know I probably hurt her feelings, but I also feel like I'm in the right here. It's not just about the car. It's about respecting my boundaries and understanding that I can't keep bailing her out every time something goes wrong. So, AITA for refusing to lend my car to my friend after she crashed it the last time. AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she lied about how she spent it. I, 27F, am in a tough spot, and I'm really not sure if I'm being unreasonable here, so I'm turning to Reddit for advice. A few months ago, my best friend, Olivia, 28F, asked me for a loan. At first, I didn't know how to respond, but now I'm questioning if I made the right decision. Let me start by giving you some context. Olivia and I have been friends for over 10 years. We met in college, and we've been through a lot together. We've celebrated birthdays, navigated breakups, supported each other through career changes, and even lived together at one point. We've always had a close bond, and I've always considered her to be one of my most trusted friends. About 3 months ago, Olivia called me up, and she sounded pretty upset. She explained that she was in a bit of a financial bind and needed help. She told me that her car broke down and that she had some unexpected medical bills for a condition she had been dealing with. She said she didn't have enough savings to cover the expenses and had already used her credit cards to the max. She mentioned that she had reached out to some other friends, but no one else could help her, so she was asking me if I could lend her $1,000. She said that she'd pay me back within a month, no problem, and she even promised to write me a contract outlining the repayment schedule. At first, I hesitated. I've never had a ton of extra money, but I do have a stable job and some savings. I'm generally pretty good at budgeting, so I figured I could afford to help her out, especially since she's my best friend and I knew it would mean a lot to her. However, there was a part of me that was nervous about lending that amount of money. I knew that if things went south, I might not see it again, but I also didn't want to be the kind of friend who would turn her back when she needed help. After talking it through, I decided that I would lend her the money, but I asked her to make sure she followed through with her repayment plan. She agreed. The next few weeks passed by, and Olivia seemed to be doing okay. She would text me updates every so often, saying that she was working on paying back the loan and that she appreciated my help. I honestly felt good about helping her. I figured she was going to get back on track soon, and things are going to work out. However, as time went on, I started to notice some red flags. First, Olivia stopped texting me about the loan entirely. I reached out to her a couple of times to check in and ask when I could expect to be repaid, but she either didn't respond or gave vague answers like, "I'll get the money to you soon, just been busy." At one point, I even asked her if everything was okay, and she reassured me that everything was fine, just a little tight right now financially. Then, about a month after I lent her the money, I saw something on Instagram that stopped me dead in my tracks. Olivia posted a picture of herself at a fancy restaurant, eating an expensive-looking meal with friends. The caption read something like, "Living my best life and enjoying every moment. Hashtag treat yourself." My heart sank when I saw that, because I couldn't help but wonder how she was able to afford that meal when she still hadn't paid me back. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to ask her about it directly. I sent Olivia a text saying something along the lines of, "Hey, I saw your post on Instagram. That restaurant looks amazing. Just wondering if you've had a chance to get together the money to pay me back yet." She responded quickly, but her answer was far from what I expected. She said, "Oh, I was just out with some friends. We had a gift card, and I've been saving up for a few things. I'll get the money to you soon, I promise. Things have just been crazy." Now, I started to feel uneasy. A gift card didn't explain why she had posted a picture of herself eating like she was financially comfortable. If she had the money for a nice meal out, Surely she could have at least paid me back the $1,000 she owed me. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. A few more weeks passed without any mention of the loan. I kept texting her every week to ask when I could expect repayment, but every time the response was the same. "I'm working on it. I'll get it to you soon." This went on for almost 2 months. At this point, I was feeling frustrated and honestly hurt. I didn't know how to approach the situation, so I decided to bring it up face to face the next time we hung out. I told myself that I would be direct but respectful, as I didn't want to escalate things or make her feel like I was accusing her of anything. So we met up for coffee one weekend, and I finally addressed the issue. I said, "Olivia, I've been really patient, but I've been waiting for 2 months for the money you owe me, and I've seen you post about doing some things that seem like you have money. I need to know what's going on because I feel like I'm not being treated fairly here." Her face immediately changed. She became defensive and said, "What are you talking about? I've told you things are tight. You know how expensive life is. I told you I'd pay you back when I could, but you're acting like I'm intentionally avoiding you. I don't need you questioning my finances." I calmly responded, "I just want some clarity. I've been waiting for 2 months, and I've been really patient, but I also feel like I'm not getting the full truth. If things are as tight as you say, then how are you able to go out to eat at nice places and hang out with friends all the time? It's just not adding up." She got really defensive at that point, and we ended up arguing. She accused me of being greedy and said that I should have just known that her situation wasn't easy. She said that she was doing her best and that I shouldn't pressure her. I told her that I wasn't trying to pressure her, but I didn't feel like she was being honest with me. At this point, I felt like I wasn't getting the respect I deserved, and I was done being patient. I ended the conversation by telling her that I was no longer going to lend her money in the future or make excuses for her behavior. I said that if she didn't pay me back within a week, I would take further steps to make sure I got my money back, including involving a mediator or legal options. She hasn't reached out since that conversation. She did send me a text a few days ago saying, "I'm sorry, I'll get the money to you, but I need time. Please don't make this worse." I haven't responded yet, and now I'm questioning whether I've done the right thing. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend more money after she lied about how she spent it. AITA for not letting my sister-in-law move in with me after she kicked her husband out. I, 34F, have a brother, James, 31M, and a sister-in-law, Laura, 30F. I've known Laura for about 5 years, ever since she and James started dating. I've always gotten along with her, though we're not super close. We've had some long conversations over the years, and while I don't know everything about her life, I'd say we've developed a decent relationship. James and Laura have been married for 3 years, and they've always seemed like a solid couple, until recently. A little over 2 months ago, I got a call from Laura, which caught me off guard. She sounded upset and asked if I could come over to talk. I immediately agreed and went over to their house, not knowing what I was walking into. When I arrived, Laura was in tears and told me that she and James had gotten into a huge argument and that she had kicked him out of the house. Apparently, they had been fighting for weeks, but this particular fight escalated to the point where she told him to leave. She said she couldn't deal with him anymore and needed space to figure things out. I was shocked. I knew they'd had some tension in their marriage, but this seemed like a big step. Laura explained that James had been acting distant and that he'd been drinking a lot lately, which had caused issues between them. She said that she was considering divorce, but wasn't sure yet, and she needed time to think. I asked her what she needed from me, and she told me that she needed a place to stay for a little while. She said she couldn't afford a hotel and didn't feel comfortable staying with her parents, so she wanted to move in with me temporarily. Now, I need to give some context. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, which I've turned into a space that works for me. I work from home and enjoy my quiet, peaceful life. I've never lived with anyone besides roommates in college, and I enjoy having my own space. I'm also pretty private and set strict boundaries when it comes to who I let into my personal life. I knew this wasn't going to be a short stay. If I let her move in, it would probably be a while before she figured things out with James. At first, I was hesitant. I love my brother, and I didn't want to be caught in the middle of their issues, but at the same time, I didn't want to leave Laura stranded. I told her I need to think about it. The last thing I wanted was to have her move in and have things get awkward, especially since her marriage was on the rocks. I also wasn't sure how long she'd stay, and I didn't want my personal space to be invaded for an indefinite amount of time. After some thought, I decided to tell her no. I know that might sound harsh, but I had to put my own needs first. I sat her down and explained that while I cared about her, I wasn't comfortable with her moving in with me. I told her that I valued my space and privacy and that I wasn't in a position to offer her a place to stay. I also mentioned that I didn't want to get involved in their marital problems and that I thought it would be better for her to stay somewhere else while she sorted things out. Laura was upset, but didn't argue with me too much. She said she understood, but was clearly disappointed. She thanked me for being honest with her and left shortly after. I thought that was the end of it. However, a few days later, Laura reached out to me again. She apologized for asking in the first place and said she understood my decision, but she was still in a tough spot. She had spoken to James, and they were considering going to therapy, but she still didn't know where she was going to stay. She asked if I could just let her stay for a week, just to give her some time to figure out what to do next. She said it would only be temporary, and she promised she wouldn't be any trouble. I thought about it again, but I was still firm in my decision. I told her that I couldn't allow her to stay with me, and that I wasn't going to change my mind. I also suggested that she reach out to a friend or stay with family until things were more settled. I told her that I was really sorry, but I had to set boundaries for my own mental and emotional well-being. I've always been a believer in setting clear boundaries, especially when it comes to my personal space, and I didn't want to compromise that just because I felt guilty. But ever since I turned her down, things have been strained between us. She's been distant with me, and while we've exchanged a few texts, I can feel that there's tension. I've also spoken to my brother James about the situation, and he's disappointed in me for not helping out Laura during such a tough time. He said I should have been there for her, considering everything she's going through with the marriage falling apart. He said that he and Laura need space from each other, and that she didn't deserve to be alone right now. I get that James is probably feeling guilty about the situation with Laura, and maybe he's projecting some of that onto me. But I feel like I'm being asked to sacrifice my comfort and boundaries for their issues, and I don't think that's fair. I've always been a reliable person, and I've helped both of them in the past, but I just don't feel comfortable letting Laura move in with me. Now, I'm starting to feel like the bad guy. I know that Laura is going through a tough time, but I'm not sure if I should have made an exception and let her stay with me. Maybe I should have just tried to help her out, even if it meant temporarily giving up some of my own comfort. I'm also concerned that this decision is going to affect my relationship with both James and Laura, and I don't want to lose their trust or create permanent tension between us. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law move in with me after she kicked her husband out. AITA for not helping my friend with her rent after she made a huge financial mistake. I, 30F, have a friend, Emma, 31F, whom I've known for about 5 years. We met in college, and over the years, we've grown really close. Emma and I have always been there for each other, and I've always tried to be supportive of her, even when she's gotten herself into some sticky situations. However, recently, she's put me in a position where I'm unsure if I've made the right decision, and I'm starting to feel like the bad guy. About 3 months ago, Emma came to me for advice. She had just moved into a new apartment, and she was really excited about it. She had been living with a roommate for a few years, but when that roommate decided to move out, Emma saw an opportunity to upgrade her living situation. She found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment that was located in a more upscale neighborhood. It was more expensive than she was used to, but Emma was confident that she could afford it. She'd just gotten a promotion at work, and she was sure that her income would be more than enough to cover her rent. At the time, I had my reservations. I knew the rent was steep, and I was a little concerned that Emma might be overestimating her financial situation. She's always been a bit impulsive with her decisions, and I've seen her make purchases or commitments that she later regretted. I even asked her if she was sure she could afford the rent, given that she was now living alone. She reassured me that she had everything under control and that she'd budgeted for it. I wanted to support her excitement, so I didn't push the issue further. However, things didn't go as planned. A month after she moved in, Emma called me in a panic. She told me that she was struggling to make ends meet and that she wasn't sure how she was going to cover her rent. Apparently, she had underestimated the cost of living alone, especially when it came to utilities, groceries, and unexpected expenses. She also hadn't accounted for the fact that her new place had a higher security deposit and other fees that she hadn't budgeted for. Emma told me that she needed help paying her rent, and she asked if I could loan her the money until she got paid again. I was shocked, to be honest. While I understand that things can sometimes be tight, I was concerned that Emma had put herself in this situation by not properly budgeting. I also wasn't sure if this was a one-time issue or if this was going to be a recurring problem. I reminded her that she had told me she could afford the rent when she first moved in, and now she was asking for help just a month later. I felt frustrated that she hadn't taken my concerns seriously before signing the lease. I told her that I couldn't loan her the money, but I offered some advice. I suggested she reach out to her landlord and explain the situation. I recommended she ask for an extension on her rent payment or see if she could work out a payment plan. I also suggested she consider cutting back on non-essential expenses until she got back on track financially. I made it clear that I was willing to help her brainstorm solutions, but I wasn't in a position to give her money. Emma didn't take this well. She got defensive, saying that she had already tried reaching out to her landlord, and they were unwilling to work with her. She also said that she didn't have any other options and that if she didn't pay her rent on time, she would be at risk of being evicted. She said I didn't understand the pressure she was under and that if I was really her friend, I would help her out, no questions asked. I felt terrible for her, but I also knew that I had to stick to my boundaries. I wasn't in a position to give her that much money, and even if I were, I didn't think it was a good idea to enable her to keep making these financial mistakes. I reminded her that I had my own financial responsibilities and that I couldn't afford to jeopardize my own stability to help her out. I also told her that I cared about her and wanted to see her succeed, but I didn't think giving her money was the right solution. She needed to take responsibility for her own finances and figure out a way to get out of this situation without relying on me. Emma didn't take kindly to this response. She accused me of being unsupportive and selfish. She said that I had more than enough money to help her and that I was just being stubborn. She even went so far as to say that I didn't care about her well-being because if I did, I would be there for her when she needed me the most. I tried to stay calm and explain my reasoning, but she wasn't having it. She told me that if I didn't help her, she didn't know if we could be friends anymore. This was a huge blow to me because I never expected her to make such an ultimatum. After that conversation, I didn't hear from Emma for a couple of weeks. I reached out a few times to check in, but she didn't respond. Finally, I got a text from her saying that she had figured things out, but that she was still hurt by my refusal to help. She told me that she needed time to process everything and that maybe we should take a break from talking for a while. I was left feeling conflicted. On one hand, I felt that I had done the right thing by setting boundaries and not giving her money. I didn't want to enable her financial irresponsibility, and I felt like I had tried to offer helpful advice without being judgmental. On the other hand, I hated the idea that our friendship might be ending over this. I know that Emma is going through a tough time, but I don't believe I should have to sacrifice my own financial security just to help her out of a situation she put herself in. Now, I'm left questioning whether I was too harsh. I get that she's going through a rough patch, but I feel like I was being reasonable by offering support in the form of advice and not money. I want to be there for her, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. So, AITA for not helping my friend with her rent after she made a huge financial mistake. AITA for asking my brother to leave my house after he ate all of my food and refused to help pay for groceries. I, 29F, am facing a situation with my brother, Michael, 27M, and I'm honestly not sure if I handled it correctly or if I overreacted. This issue has been bothering me for a few weeks now, and I'm still unsure how to feel about it. So I'm turning to Reddit to see if I'm in the wrong here. A little background. I live in a house that I purchased a few years ago. It's a 3-bedroom house, and I've always enjoyed having space to myself. My brother, Michael, lives in a small apartment across town and has been struggling financially for the past year. He lost his job due to the pandemic and has had a hard time finding steady work since. He's been bouncing from one short-term gig to the next, and he's been living paycheck to paycheck. A few months ago, he asked if he could stay with me for a while until he could get back on his feet. I agreed because we've always had a pretty good relationship, and I wanted to help him out. He promised he would only stay for a couple of months at most and would contribute to the household expenses once he was able to find a job. At first, things were going okay. He helped out with some light cleaning, took care of a few small tasks around the house, and we spent some time catching up. I even helped him out by driving him to job interviews when he didn't have a car at the time. However, after about a month, I started noticing some things that began to make me uncomfortable. The first issue was food. I don't mind sharing food with people, especially family, but I started noticing that I was running out of groceries much faster than usual. I would go to the store, buy enough food for the week, and then by midweek, everything I bought was either gone or significantly diminished. I'm not talking about small things like snacks or a few ingredients. My meals, my staples, even items I specifically label for myself, like my favorite almond milk or a special frozen dinner I'd been looking forward to, were disappearing. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe I was just eating more than I realized, or perhaps I was forgetting what I'd already eaten. But when I found that an entire pack of chicken breasts I had bought for dinner was gone, and all that was left was an empty package in the fridge, I decided to ask Michael about it. He didn't seem particularly concerned and just shrugged it off, saying something like, "Oh, I must have eaten it. Sorry, I didn't realize you were saving it." This happened again and again. He would eat all the food, and when I asked about it, he would give me some excuse like not realizing how much he had eaten or that he was really hungry and didn't think about it. I started to feel frustrated. I was trying to be understanding because I know he's going through a tough time, but it felt like he was taking advantage of my hospitality. I started buying specific items only for myself, but they'd still disappear. I'd even label things with my name, and they'd be gone by the end of the day. It was clear he wasn't respecting my space or my stuff. Eventually, I sat him down to talk about it. I told him that it wasn't just about the food, but also about the lack of responsibility. I had been keeping track of the groceries, and it felt like I was the only one contributing. I had never asked him for rent or utilities, but at this point, I needed some help with the groceries. I told him that if he was going to continue staying with me, I expected him to at least help pay for the food he was eating. I also asked that he respect the food I bought for myself, and not just take whatever he wanted. He got defensive and said he didn't have the money to help out right now, but he promised he would try to be more mindful of what he ate. I thought this was a fair request, so I agreed to give him some time to sort things out. However, the situation only got worse. One weekend, I came home from running errands and found that he had invited some of his friends over to hang out. It wasn't a huge issue at first, but then I noticed that they were eating the food I had bought for the week. I specifically remember seeing one of his friends eating the last of the pasta I had planned to use for dinner. When I asked Michael about it, he said, "Oh, they were hungry, and I didn't think it would be a big deal." At that point, I was livid. I hadn't given him permission to invite people over, and I certainly hadn't given him permission to let them eat my food without asking. I had spent my money on those groceries, and I felt like my kindness was being completely disregarded. I tried to stay calm and explain to Michael why I was upset, but he just brushed me off. He said, "It's not a big deal, calm down. It's just food." But to me, it was a big deal. It wasn't just about food, it was about respect and boundaries. I told him that this wasn't working for me anymore and that I needed him to either start contributing or find a different place to stay. Michael didn't take that well at all. He immediately got defensive and accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. He said that I was acting like I was the only one who had it hard and that he had been going through a tough time and just needed support. I acknowledged that he was going through a tough time, but I also told him that living together meant respecting each other's space and responsibilities. I couldn't keep carrying all the financial weight and dealing with the constant food theft without it taking a toll on me. After the argument, I gave him a few days to think about things. I hoped he would come to the conclusion that he needed to make some changes, but instead, he just continued to act like nothing had happened. He ate all the food again, and when I brought it up, he gave me the same half-hearted apology, saying, "I'll try to do better," but then nothing changed. It became clear to me that he wasn't willing to make any real effort. I was at my breaking point. The situation was making me anxious, and I started dreading coming home. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about the fact that I felt like I was being taken for granted. So, after a particularly stressful week where I found my groceries gone again, I made the decision to ask Michael to leave. I told him that I was no longer comfortable with him staying at my house unless he was willing to contribute and respect my boundaries. I explained that this wasn't a permanent solution, but he needed to find another place to stay. Michael was furious. He said I was kicking him out when he needed me the most and that I was being unreasonable. He accused me of kicking him when he's down and said that I was just acting like a typical selfish older sister. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be cruel, but that I needed to set boundaries for the sake of my own mental and emotional well-being. He eventually moved out, but we haven't spoken much since then. I feel guilty, but at the same time, I'm relieved. I've had some time to reflect on the situation, and I still think I made the right decision. I know he's going through a hard time, but I don't think it's fair for him to take advantage of my generosity. So, AITA for asking my brother to leave my house after he ate all of my food and refused to help pay for groceries. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she broke up with her boyfriend. I, 27F, have been best friends with Jess, 28F, for over 10 years. We've been through everything together: school, breakups, job changes, family drama, and all the ups and downs that come with adulthood. I've always considered Jess one of the most important people in my life. She's funny, kind, and fiercely loyal. That's why I agreed to let her stay at my apartment when she needed somewhere to go after her breakup with her boyfriend, Alex, 29M. Jess and Alex have been dating for 2 years, and honestly, I never really liked him. He always seemed a little off to me, too possessive, too critical, and kind of rude to Jess when no one was around. But Jess was head over heels for him, and I kept my opinions mostly to myself, only ever offering advice when she asked. So when she called me a week ago, devastated and crying about how Alex had broken up with her over text, I wasn't shocked. I was, however, heartbroken for her. She asked if she could come stay with me for a while until she got back on her feet, and I immediately agreed. I thought it would be temporary, maybe a week or two, just to give her space and help her get her bearings again. Jess has always been independent and strong, and I figured she would bounce back quickly. So, I welcomed her into my one-bedroom apartment, and everything seemed okay at first. For the first few days, Jess was understandably upset and emotional. She cried a lot, talked about Alex constantly, and spent a lot of time on her phone texting or calling mutual friends about what happened. I didn't mind. I knew it was a hard time for her, and I wanted to be there for her in any way I could. But as the days went on, something started to shift. It became clear that Jess wasn't just grieving her breakup. She was becoming increasingly dependent on me. She started staying in my living room during the day, curled up on the couch in her pajamas, not doing much of anything. I would come home from work and find her still in the same spot, watching TV or scrolling through her phone. I tried to be supportive, but the longer she stayed, the more I felt like I was enabling her to wallow in her sadness. I would ask if she wanted to go for a walk or do something productive, but she always declined. "I'm just not ready," she'd say. "I'm exhausted, and I just need a rest right now." At first, I understood, but after a week, it was starting to feel like she wasn't even trying to move forward. Meanwhile, I was going to work, dealing with my own responsibilities, and trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in my life, while Jess seemed to be stuck in a cycle of negativity. Then there was the issue of the living situation itself. My apartment is small, one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room. I've always liked having my own space, and having someone else in the apartment for an extended period of time was beginning to feel suffocating. Jess would leave her things all over the place, her clothes, her makeup, her dishes, and it felt like my apartment was slowly becoming hers. I asked her a couple of times to pick up after herself and keep her things in her room, but she would always say, "I'll get to it later," and then nothing would change. I started to feel like my own home wasn't mine anymore. I couldn't relax in my living room without seeing her stuff everywhere, and I couldn't cook in the kitchen without her hovering over me, telling me what I should make. Even when I wanted to watch something on TV, she'd always want to watch something different, and I'd have to compromise, which made me feel like my preferences didn't matter. But the final straw came a few days ago. I came home after a long day of work, and Jess was sitting on the couch, crying. I immediately sat down next to her and asked what was wrong. She said she had been texting Alex again and that he had said some things that really upset her. I told her I was sorry, but also reminded her that it was important for her to start moving on and stop dwelling on the past. I told her it was okay to grieve, but it wasn't healthy to keep getting sucked back into it. That's when she said something that caught me off guard. I don't think I'm ready to leave yet. I don't know where else I'd go. I don't want to be alone. I was taken aback. I'd already told her multiple times that I was happy to help her get back on her feet, but I didn't want her to just stay in my apartment indefinitely. I didn't want to be the person she depended on to avoid dealing with her feelings or getting her life together. I told her that I had been hoping she would start looking for her own place soon, that I loved having her here, but I needed some space too. I told her I wasn't trying to kick her out, but I couldn't have her here forever. Just got really upset. She started saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me most, and that I didn't understand how hard this breakup was for her. She said I wasn't being supportive enough and that I was only thinking about myself. She told me that if I really cared about her, I'd let her stay as long as she needed, without making her feel like a burden. I tried to explain to her that it wasn't about not caring or not wanting to help, but about needing to maintain my own mental health and boundaries. I told her that I had my own life to manage, and I couldn't be her emotional caretaker all the time. I also mentioned that I didn't want to enable her to avoid facing her own issues. At this point, I could see that she wasn't processing what I was saying, and she was just getting more upset. The next day, she asked me if I could help her pay for a security deposit for a new apartment. She said she had found a place that would work for her, but she didn't have enough money saved up. I told her I couldn't afford to help her financially at that moment, especially because I had my own expenses to take care of. I suggested that she talk to her parents or explore other options, but she was visibly angry and hurt by my response. Now, Jess has given me the cold shoulder. She's barely speaking to me, and it's creating a weird, uncomfortable atmosphere in my apartment. I know she's hurt, but I also feel like I'm being taken for granted. I've always tried to be there for her, but I can't keep putting my own needs aside for someone who's not willing to help themselves. I'm starting to feel guilty, though, because I know she's going through a tough time, and I don't want to come across as unsympathetic or uncaring. But at the same time, I don't think I'm wrong for needing my space and setting boundaries. I've been supportive in every way I can, but I can't be the one to fix everything for her. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she broke up with her boyfriend and has been living with me for a couple of weeks. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.